Welcome to Women Winning Divorce. I am your host, Heather Quick. I am an attorney, entrepreneur, author, and founder of Florida Women's Law Group, the only divorce firm for women by women. I love thinking big, thinking outside the box, creating creative solutions for women, and empowering women to win in all aspects of their life. Our approach at Florida Women's Law Group is to provide women with a strategy to not only achieve their objectives, but win at life. I believe that what may show up as adversity is simply an opportunity to change and improve your life. In each episode, I sit down with innovative professionals and leaders who are focused on how you can be your best self before, during, and after divorce. In these conversations, we are looking at how women can win at life. I have the unique opportunity to meet women when they are at a transition period of life. But that is only the beginning to becoming your best self and winning at life on your terms. With our guests, we enjoy the opportunity to explore ways all women can win and enhance their life, no matter where they are in their journey. Because divorce is just a point in life, not the end and not what defines you, rather a catalyst for your growth. Welcome to this week's edition of Women Winning Divorce. I'm Heather Quick, owner and attorney at Florida Women's Law Group. Today, I'm joined by Dr. AmyJ Baker. Amy is a nationally recognized expert in parental alienation, specifically in divorce, and has authored or co-authored over 10 books. Her expertise comes from a Ph.D. in developmental psychology and many years in this space. Welcome, Amy.
Glad to be here.
Well, we are so happy to have you, and it is such an important topic. And so we are looking forward to discussing parental alienation with you today, and would love to know a little bit about your background and how you got to where you are professionally.
Well, I got a PhD in developmental psychology from Teachers College of Columbia University a million years ago, back in 1989. But going even further back than that, when I was a teenager, I was reading this book called Somewhere a Child is Crying, and it was an epiphanal moment for me, and it really put me in the direction of something related to child abuse, children's well-being. I wasn't very well formulated at the time. Many years later, I ended up doing my doctoral work in attachment theory and really zeroed in on parent-child relationships. And I did a lot of research on variety of impacts on parent-child relationships. And at some point, parental alienation was just one more topic that I happened to be studying. And then somehow it took over my life. It's like the topic that just basically defined me, consumed me, energized me. And yes, I have 10 books, but probably 8 of them are on some topic related to parental alienation. It's really one of the many things that I focus on, but it has really captured my heart.
Wow. And I mean, I got to tell you, because it's a lot of work writing the books, but how, I guess, does it keep evolving? Like, how is there that much on parental alienation? But I mean, I know that there is, because people, human beings, right, in different situations. But wow, I just didn't know there was that much a body of study and information on it.
Yeah, I've probably written 20 or 30 peer-reviewed publication papers on different aspects of it. You know, you just sort of keep peeling it away. In terms of the book, each one has a special focus. So one is on what happens to the kids when they grow up. One is a workbook for children. One is focusing just on legal strategies. So I co-authored that with an attorney. Then there's sort of more basic parenting books. I have at least 2 on that. So each one looks at it from a particular slice.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I mean, why don't tell me a little bit of, like, because I can kind of imagine, but for our listeners, how does your work intersect with family law and the legal space?
So yeah, that's a great question. So that wasn't my intention. I'm a developmental psychologist. There I was, just writing a book because I was interested in this phenomenon. And I got sort of pulled into the legal realm in two different ways. One is as an expert witness, which I do not do anymore, but I did for 10 years, traveling around the country, educating courts about alienation. I have this sort of framework that there's four main hurdles that you need to help a judge get over if you want to succeed in your parental alienation case in court. And I would educate the judges about these four topics. And then I also now have developed a coaching practice where I help parents with a variety of alienation type issues, being more effective in their interactions with their children. That's the main thing, but also being more effective in their interactions with the other parent. I help them prepare for custody evaluations, something that sadly I don't think attorneys do enough of. Today, I just worked with a client who's going into mediation in some sort of basic do's and don'ts about not getting pressured and how to kind of manage that feeling like you have to compromise, and but also helping him think about what are the main things that he wants, what's he willing to sort of give up on, what's he likely to lose in court anyway. So those are things that he might concede in the mediation. So mostly I'm a parenting focused coach, but it does, because so many alienation cases are in court or dealing with court adjacent people like guardian ad litems and custody evaluators, it's sort of become a part of what I do also.
That's fascinating. I mean, I really do. I could see how your interest, and then it just blossomed into this area that, brought you into the courtroom and as an expert witness, because it's very important. And I know we'll get into it, more as we go through now. So obviously clinical psychologist, right?
Yep,
and then
developmental psychologist.
developmental psychologist. I want to get it right. Okay.
Yep.
And then did a stint as expert witness, and obviously still an author, but now is your focus more on coaching, or just obviously you're not doing the expert witness traveling?
Yes, absolutely. So I did just finish a book that came out in September called Parenting Under Fire. So maybe there's another book in my future. I don't know. I doubt it, but that's what I say every time. But yeah, basically, if I'm thinking about parental alienation, it is as a coach, not as an expert witness, not as an author, not even as a researcher so much. I haven't done a study in a couple of years. Maybe again, there'll be some new study that I want to do. But right now, I'm really so happy coaching.
Now, when you're coaching, I'm guessing, but I could be wrong. Are you coaching the parent who is, the victim, say? I mean, I know the children are the victim, but the one who the other parent is trying to alienate, or do you work with both sides? Tell us a little bit about that, because it's fascinating.
So I work with anybody who comes to me. Now, who's going to come to me? People come to me because their children are rejecting them.
Okay.
And their relationship is becoming more fraught, and they are concerned. The parent is concerned that this conflict in the relationship is because the other parent is inciting conflict and interfering and undermining in the relationship with their kids. So basically, it's targeted parents and people who think they're targeted parents, but they might not be. I'm not doing independent evaluations to know for sure that it is alienation. And I always tell my clients, you cannot say Amy Baker said it's alienation, because that's not where I'm coming from. I tell my clients, I will take what you tell me and I will give you advice based on that. If you're not accurately reporting what's going on, then my advice might not be so helpful. So it's sort of, it benefits them to tell me where their struggles are as a parent so that I can help them.
That's great for those cases and those individuals, for sure. So we did jump right in, but I do want our listeners to understand, if you could give us a quick definition of if there is a quick definition of parental alienation, and what it might look like.
Sure. So it's a family dynamic in which a parent engages in behaviors. We call them parental alienation strategies or parental alienation behaviors that foster a child's unjustified rejection of the other parent. So if a child is rejecting a parent because that parent abused the child, molested the child, beat the child, abandoned the child, neglected the child. That's not alienation because that's not unjustified rejection. So I'm sort of picking apart the definition, highlighting one parent has to engage in behaviors that foster a child's unjustified rejection of the other parent. That's what alienation is.
And the unjustified is what's really important to determine, I would imagine, because, right, is it something you've done as the parent, or is it coming from another source, right?
Right. And whichever it is, from my perspective, not as an expert witness, but as a coach, I'm there to help people be better parents, to be more empathically attuned to their kids, to be more effective, to to understand more their child's perspective. So from my perspective, it doesn't matter so much whether it's alienation or something else, because I'm still going to work with that parent to try to help them be better. That's my goal.
That is awesome, because I know, well, we all want to be better parents, or we all should want to be. And we all can be better. I know that. So tell me though, how does parental alienation, show up, manifest itself, in the divorce process, in your experience?
Well, there's the behaviors of the alienating parent, and then there's the behaviors of the alienated child. So it gets manifested in two ways. One is you might start noticing that the other parent is doing these things that are inciting conflict between you and your child. And there's 17 primary parental alienation strategies. That's one of the focuses of my research. I think everybody now sort of talks about the 17 primary parental alienation strategies. That comes from my research, both interviewing adults who lived through it as kids, interviewing parents who are going through it currently, and then also surveying young adults who are sort of just coming out of childhood and putting together that research into a sort of the definitive list of the primary parental alienation strategies. And there's really very little surprise here. I'm going to rattle them off, but and they're saying bad things about, bad mouthing, interfering in contact, interfering in communication, making it hard for the child to think about or look at pictures of the other parent, having the child, it's sort of inciting or encouraging the child to keep secrets from the other parent, to spy on the other parent, forcing the child to choose, encouraging the child to reject the other parent, referring to somebody else by, as mom or dad instead of, the parent, referring to that parent by their first name. So instead of saying like mom's at the door or dad's on the phone, it would be, Phyllis is here or John is, so using their first name. Withholding information from that other parent so they can't be involved in the child's life. I probably skipped one or two, but those are the main ways that in one way or another incite conflict between a parent and a child. So when the targeted parent finds out their child kept secret from them, they're mad at the child. When they find out the child's been spying on them, they get mad at the child. When their child calls them by their first name, they get mad at the child. When the child snubs them, they feel hurt and angry at the child. So it incites bad feelings between the parent and child. So that's one way to think about the manifestation of alienation. The other is the actual behaviors in the child. So there are 8 behaviors that are unique and specific to alienated kids, above and beyond, I don't like you, I don't want to see you, whatever. That's sort of a given that the kid is rejecting you. But then there's 8 sort of very specific types of behaviors that alienated kids exhibit that even kids who have been abused by a parent don't exhibit towards that abusive parent. They're just specific to alienated kids. So obviously, if your kid is exhibiting those behaviors and the other parent is doing those 17 or some of those 17 things, most likely you're in an alienation situation.
So what are some of those behaviors by the children?
Lack of ambivalence. So it's seeing one parent is all good and one parent is all bad. So even kids who have been abused, for example, don't worship the non-abusive parent, and they don't think the abusive parent is all bad. Like they will say, I love my mom, I just don't want her to beat me. They don't think
Yeah,
everything
right.
about that person is bad. Only alienated kids have no ambivalence. One parent is like an angel and the other is the devil. So that's just one example.
Okay.
Another is weak, frivolous, and absurd reasons. So if you ask an alienated kid, why are you rejecting your mom? Like you lived with her for 10 years and now,
Uh-huh.
you went to dad's for the summer. Now you come back, you hate your mother. Like you say you hate your mother. Like why? The
Right.
reasons they give are weak, frivolous, trivial, and absurd. And I will give you some real life examples, but you won't believe it because you'll think
Okay.
it's so bizarre. My father's car smells like coffee, right?
Oh, okay.
My mother wears cowboy boots with skirts. I mean, they're ridiculous.
Right.
My
Yeah.
father locked me in the closet for 3 weeks and didn't feed me. You would be dead if you
Yeah.
didn't eat for 3 weeks and have water for 3 weeks. So they're just not they don't explain the level of hostility that the child has. I saw an interview with a 17-year-old boy who lived with, back and forth with mom, had a seemingly good relationship, then became alienated. And he's interviewed, and the evaluator says to him, like, what's the deal, kid? Like, why are you so hateful towards your mom? And he strokes his chin like he's, got the wisdom of the world. And, he said, it's just an intangible. Like he could not even come up with an explanation. So
Yeah.
so I gave you two examples
Mhm.
of the 8 behavioral manifestations. One was lack of ambivalence. The other is weak, frivolous, and absurd reasons. There's 6 others. Each of them is specific to alienated kids.
Now, let me ask you this because I'm wondering, is there any age that is more susceptible to this of a child as far as children go than others?
So I think that people think that by the time kids get to be teenagers, they are too savvy to be manipulated by a parent to unjustifiably reject another parent. And I have that opinion that that's what other people think based on court decisions that I've been involved with, um, discussions that I've had, trainings I've done with therapists, or GALs, or whatever. And that is not true.
Mhm.
Many teenagers, that 17-year-old boy, as an
Yeah.
example. So we as Americans have this idea that we have agency, that we sort of make our own decisions, we have free will, we, make rational decisions, we're making choices for ourselves. And
Mhm.
there's a fair amount of research that shows that most people do not believe that advertising works. It's like, no, I'm not buying this box of detergent because the swirly pattern and where it's located on the shelf. I'm buying it because I know scientifically that it's better than that box over there. And that is not true. Advertising works. There's this great study. The supermarket did this where they had a big pyramid of soup cans in a display area in the supermarket, and there was a sign that said limit 12 per customer, and people bought 12 cans of soup. It was playing on the principle of scarcity, the fear
Right.
that other people will get it and people can easily be manipulated. So
Right.
teenagers, like the rest of us, can be manipulated. And I'm picking on teenagers because they're, in a way, the most susceptible to alienation because it's when the courts start to say, oh, the kids are too old. They're 15, there's nothing we can do. We can't make them, go to see a parent
Mhm.
they don't want to see. And so alienators, I think, kind of step up the alienation when the kids get to be old enough to vote with their feet, so to speak, because
Mm.
the courts are less likely to enforce a parenting plan. And they're a little bit more, I think, susceptible to being bribed or bought because they have more desires, whether it's a horse or a car or things that you wouldn't bother getting. Kids are happy with the Barbie doll and like a bouncing ball. Teenagers
Right.
have more elaborate, tastes and needs and desires, and they can be enticed away from another parent. And sadly, that intersection of the child having more needs, the courts thinking they're old enough, and a parent sort of stepping up their alienation, it's really a recipe for disaster. I think the people who are less likely, the kids who are less likely to become alienated, are the way younger kids, because they don't remember, oh, I'm supposed to hate daddy or I'm supposed to hate mommy. A 2-year-old, now, I'm not saying 2-year-olds are impervious to alienation, because you can induce a fear in them. You can induce a phobia of the other parent, but they're less attuned to sort of subtle cues and things. And sometimes they do forget and they just happily go with the other parent. But basically, none of us are immune to manipulation.
That is a really good point. And I think that's amazing. And it makes complete sense what you say about teenagers and then how that intersects with the way the courts view them and, the divorce process and certainly with custody issues. Now,
I'd
there?
like to add just one more thing about that.
Yes.
The main way that parents of teenagers enact the alienation is by giving them more freedom, fewer expectations, fewer, no curfew, sure, have a party with alcohol at our house. There's sort of a race to the bottom. And because the kids can be manipulated to believe that that is the parents' way of loving them and respecting them. My mom respects me so much and she honors my voice and she trusts me. She knows that I can handle having a 1 o'clock curfew at the age of 14. And so the other parents' sort of normative expectations ends up looking harsh and mean. And, daddy wants you to have a curfew because he doesn't trust you. And so it's sort of ego gets caught up in it. They feel flattered by the parent who doesn't make them clean their room or doesn't make them whatever. And that's just another way that, the alienation happens.
Very interesting. Totally makes sense. Now, okay, so, we talked about your background and that was some great definitions to give us context, but where does parental alienation stem from? Like, does it occur during a traumatic event or something like a divorce? Because, it's not everybody, right? But it does happen in certain situations.
Yeah, and it can happen in intact families. I have clients I have a dad client, in fact, probably more than one, who's sort of in this similar situation of not leaving the home because there's a fear that he will never see his kids because the alienation has already started. In fact, I have mom clients in the same boat. They're like, the marriage is really not in a good place. There's very little like love and affection left, but I'm not leaving because the kids are already so hostile and rejecting. And especially if they're already older, like teenagers, knowing the court's not going to make the kids visit them, they're like, I'm going to stick it out because at least I pass my kids in the hallway and maybe there's a chance I can sort of have some influence or, connection with my kids. So it definitely can happen before the divorce. It can happen after the divorce. So there's no.
And where does it stem from? Like what causes or what is, what happens in someone's life that then they, start doing this?
So I have I'm sort of the mind that it's not something I'm going to spend any time thinking about.
Okay.
Because my clients are the parents who are going through it. And I discourage them actively from trying to psychologize the motivations of the other parent. Unless I do encourage people to think about, am I doing something that's annoying the other parent or threatening the other parent or destabilizing the other parent that I have control over that I shouldn't be doing, so that maybe they'll be a better co-parent and they won't be so hurt and angry or threatened by me. So yes, you have to look at yourself. But to say, when my clients start telling me, well, when my client was a little girl, I'm like, I don't want to hear it. It's irrelevant for me. For their treatment, it might be relevant, but we're not working with that person. I'm working with I'm working with the person in front of me. That's the person that I'm going to be focusing on. I feel that too often targeted parents get really energized around thinking about the pathology of the other parent. I mean, without too much exaggeration, I will say that every male client I have thinks his ex-wife is a borderline, and every female client I have thinks, her ex-husband's a narcissist. And on some level, it's irrelevant. People don't gain or lose custody based on having a personality disorder. It's not a mental illness. People kind of mix up the two, disorder versus illness. It's not in the best interest of the child statute. Is this parent, narcissistic? It's irrelevant. It's their behavior. So the example that I give my clients is, if you're supposed to call the landline, I'm going to have to come up with a better example because people don't have landlines anymore. But for right now, we'll use that one. Let's imagine your kids are at the other parent's house and the court order says every Wednesday at 7, you're allowed to call that landline and talk to your kids and say goodnight. And you call and the other parent picks up the phone and says, hello, jerk, and hangs up on you. Now, it doesn't matter if the parent's doing that because they're a narcissist or a sociopath or a borderline. It's a bad act. They're violating the court order. Hopefully somebody will care. You tell people the bad acts the other person's engaging in. Let them think about if it's a disorder or not, but the court should be focusing on behaviors. So I really stay away from speculating about why the other parent is doing what they're doing.
Well, and that makes sense, right? Because at the end of the day, it's the behavior and, what can you do, of course, to repair their relationship with their child. Now, are there some concepts you find yourself explaining more often or repeatedly with your clients?
I would say there's a host of them, and that's what all got scooped up and put into my latest book. So, for example, what do you do when your child's talking to you in a way that's really unpleasant? What people would call rude or nasty or disrespectful. So the first thing is no negative labels. We're never going to talk about children using negative labels. It creates, I think, animosity in your heart towards your own child if you think of them as abusive or toxic or rude or nasty or disrespectful. But what do you do when your child is behaving that way? So that's something over and over and over again. It's so common. And the problem is if the parent sort of takes the bait and gets angry back or sarcastic or unkind to the child in response to the child's, quote, rudeness, then the kid thinks, oh, dad's right, mom's not nice, or, dad's right, mom's a meanie or whatever. So you're reinforcing the lie. So I talk a lot in the book and a lot with my clients about managing those situations. Another big one is, what do you do when your kid accuses you of something you did not do? You beat me when I was a baby. You stole my college money. You never loved me. You yell all the time. You don't listen to me. We were never close. Normal human reaction is to say, what are you talking about? You know that didn't happen, or that's ridiculous. Why would you think that? And the problem is when you say to your child, that's not true, you're calling your child a liar. And if you say to your child, that's ridiculous, you're calling your child an idiot. And if you say to your child, who told you that? You're calling them a puppet and you've insulted them. So I spend a lot of time in my coaching helping parents navigate these situations. And I sort of written up my basic go-to strategies that are counterintuitive. They're not what you would think work, but do work. So those are some of the things. How to text your child, that's a big one. What do I say? How often should I text? Should I send pictures? Should I do this? Should I do that? So a big part of the book and my coaching is sort of the do's and don'ts for each type of text. If you're going to send a picture of the child, here are the things to think about. If you're going to offer your child a gift, here are the things to think about. And then the third part of the book, which is the third biggest topic that I work on in my coaching, is how to reach out to an adult alienated child over 18, hopefully not living with a favored parent, hopefully off in college or post-college, living their life. How do you try to open that door to start a conversation with that person? And again, it's counterintuitive. My clients think that basically you only have two options. You either convince the child they're wrong for being mad at you, or you grovel, I'm sorry for anything I ever did, forgive me, forgive me, forgive me. And neither of those work. So I've developed this whole other way of trying to reach out. So the things that I talk about over and over again are the things that I ended up putting in that book called Parenting Under Fire.
Awesome. Well, we'll make sure we have the link for that in the show notes, because I know there'll be a lot of people that will be very helpful too. Now, we as attorneys, look at parental alienation and time sharing cases. What is your typical approach for helping attorneys, or your prior approach to helping attorneys build a case when parental alienation is going on?
So the first thing is, and this might be surprising, but what I tell my clients is there's many things you could go to court for, and there's only one of those situations where you would even need to use the word parental alienation. And most of the time, using the phrase parental alienation is a terrible idea and not necessary. Not only terrible, but totally unnecessary. If all you're doing is asking for a custody evaluation or enforcement of something, or you have no contact and you want supervised visits just to sort of get the ball rolling, there's many things that you could ask for in the court. You want your child to be in therapy. You don't need to talk about alienation. It's irrelevant. And when you do, what the other side and the courts hear is, I'm perfect and everything is that other person's fault. So it backfires. And it invites the other side to have a whole hearing just on, is alienation real or not? It's just totally unnecessary most of the time. The only time, this is my opinion, the only time you need to use the phrase parental alienation when you go to court is if your kids are severely alienated, and I can define that if you want, and you want to have the court order a parental alienation immersion treatment, because you cannot get into the treatment programs. There's two that I recommend, but there's others out there. But you can't get into the two that I recommend without a court order that says it's parental alienation. And you're not going to get a court order that says it's parental alienation without putting on a parental alienation case. But if all you're asking for is, let's say, a custody evaluation, you want there to be an evaluation, all you have to say is, there's a breach in the relationship, there's conflict in the family, I want an evaluator to figure out what the underlying problem is. You do not need to say this is a case of parental alienation.
So I would like you to define severe parental alienation, and then we'll talk a little bit about those immersion programs.
You can't get into the program without it being severe alienation. So severe is either the kids aren't coming at all, or they're coming for their parenting time, but they're basically shut down the whole time. They're, the case of the kid who brings the duffel bag, even for like a weekend, and it's filled with water and food, and they won't even, they won't drink your water, they won't eat your food. They're basically shut down 99% of the time. That's severe alienation. If the kids are coming and there's conflict, there's things that you could be doing, but you're never going to get into one of those programs. And so there would be no reason to ask for, introduce the concept of parental alienation in court. Like I tell my clients, you've been through something very difficult, and probably you feel that your relationship with your kids is fraught. You feel like it's slipping out of your, through your fingers. You have a lot of, worry, and probably you sat down at the computer and typed like, my kids don't like me anymore. And somehow you stumbled upon this parental alienation concept, and it was a light bulb moment for you. And it was the first time you felt like you're not going crazy and you're not alone. And there's a name for this, and there's people who are talking about it. And that's powerful. But that doesn't mean you need to talk about it in court. Just because you understand that that's what's going on doesn't mean strategically it makes sense to talk about it in court.
Yeah, I do. I understand that. And it's really hard to prove in many cases. And for what, like you said, right? We got to look at what outcomes are available. What would you be looking for? Is that necessary to go down that road to achieve those objectives?
Right. I mean, most of the time, my clients, the kids are mild to moderate. They're not coming. There's some conflict. They're not coming consistently. There's a lot of negotiation. I'll only come Thursday if you let me leave Friday, that kind of thing. The kids are ignoring them when the other parent is present. It's like starting to be problematic. If you get it at that point, it's too early to ask for one of those programs. So what you're going to do is ask for some kind of enforcement of your parenting time. Maybe the other parent is encroaching on your parenting time. They're scheduling things on your time. Maybe you want therapy for you and your child. You do not need to talk about alienation. You can say, at most, you could say, I believe the other parent is undermining and interfering in my relationship with the kids. There's no need to introduce parental alienation into the mix.
Now, let's just talk, because I am curious as to, and I'm sure our listeners are as well, an immersion program for a severe alienation case. What are those?
So there's two programs that I generally recommend. I have no financial relationship to them. So, for a variety of reasons, I like a program called Family Bridges and a program called Turning Points for Families. They both have websites. People can find them. The premise of the program is to repair a severely alienated relationship. It has to be court ordered. It's 4 days of immersion treatment, not round the clock. The kids aren't kept up, through the night, but like you're living together with that parent and the therapist, either in a hotel room or in some kind of a residential space that accommodates. And it's an experiential program, so it's not aimed at like talking and insight. The parent and kid have an opportunity to re-experience each other. And these programs have a 90+% success rate. They're highly successful because the kids want it to work. That's the thing that's so hard for people to understand. Even that 17-year-old smug kid, it's just an intangible, I just don't like my mother anymore. Within 24 hours, he was sitting on her lap. I saw the picture. The programs work. These people know what they're doing. It's 4 days of intensive and then 90 days afterwards where they go back to living in their home community. But the kids are full-time with the rejected parent, formerly rejected. By the time the 4 days are over, the kids are happy to be with that parent again. And then they have 90 days of aftercare treatment, sometimes more than 90 days. The alienating parent is sort of reintroduced into the mix, and the goal is for the kids to have a relationship with both parents.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. And for severe cases now, because there is a difference between rejection from a child versus true parental alienation, or is there?
Well, you need to see those 8 behavioral manifestations of alienation. It's not just rejection. It's worshiping the other parent. It's merciless. Did I say that right? And no mercy. It's rejecting the parent with no remorse, no caring for the other parent, rejecting all their friends and family. So it's not just, mom, I don't like you anymore. And I hate grandma and grandpa and aunts and uncles and cousins and, the whole family set. So when all those 8 behaviors, the 8 behavioral manifestations are seen together, then it is alienation. when you also have it combined with knowing that the favored parent has engaged in the alienation strategies and the rejected parent has not abused or neglected the child.
Mhm.
So I'm sort of mushing things up a little bit, but there is this model we call the Baker model after me, but many people know it as the 5-factor model. We're trying to get people away from calling it the 5-factor model. But anyway, it's the 5 factors that need to be present to say that a child is alienated. And one is, intense rejection. So we have to have that. The second is a prior positive relationship. So the kid has to have had a good relationship with the parent they're rejecting. Absence of abuse or neglect on the part of the now rejected parent. The fourth factor is that the favored parent has to be engaging in multiple parental alienation strategies. Those are the 17 behaviors. And then the fifth factor is that the kid is exhibiting the 8 behavioral manifestations of alienation. So it's only alienation when all those things are combined.
Got it. Now, you said at the beginning of the show that when you were an expert witness, that you would go in and obviously in testifying, but explaining to the court. I think you said four things they needed to look at. Could you tell us about that?
So I think about it as a baseball analogy, like you're trying to get your kid back to home base. So I think it was like first base, second base, third base, home. So there's 4. So those are sort of like the 4 hurdles or processes you need to get the judge through. So the first is you need to convince the judge that alienation in theory is possible, that there's a scientific basis, that it exists, that a kid can be manipulated to reject a parent who does not deserve to be rejected. If you cannot convince the judge of that, or the judge, doesn't believe that, you're sunk. You're not, that's it. You're struck out at first base. Now, how do you do that? Well, a judge might already believe in alienation. You can go back through case law. You can see things they've already said. Maybe they've ruled in alienation in other cases. Otherwise, you need an expert to come in and talk about the science underlying, the theory of manipulation, how does undue influence work, etc. Mm-hmm. The second, so that's you're getting your kid to first base. Second base is the judge has to believe that alienation is happening in this case. So a judge could say, yes, alienation is real, but it's not happening here. So the way you do that is with the 5-factor model I just explained, right? Mm-hmm. You have to have the evidence that there was a prior positive relationship, evidence that this parent did not abuse, abandon, neglect the child, evidence that the other parent is engaging in multiple parental alienation strategies, evidence that the kid's exhibiting the 8 behavioral manifestations. Okay, second base. Third base is getting the judge to want to do something about it. This is by far the hardest thing because, no offense to judges, but they're lazy cowards. That's what I say. I say it to them. And you know what? I've given trainings of judges, and they're like, yeah, it's true. We are kind of lazy cowards. They know it. They would marry the status quo if they could. Now, a nicer way to say it is they're highly risk averse. They're very afraid of sending a child to be with the parent and then the child hurting themselves, running away, killing themselves. And I don't want to trivialize that. Yeah. That is what they're afraid of. And the other side, their job is to make the judge afraid of enforcing the parenting time or ordering the immersion program. Oh, it's, it's draconian. It's too much. The beloved child, the child can't be torn away from them. So your job is to explain to the judge, or my job as the expert is to explain to the judge the risks involved in maintaining a parental alienation situation. So this is what the judge thinks. And there's 2 things the judge could think, and you will, strike out at third base. One is, yes, alienation is real. I believe it's happening. That's second base. Yep, I believe it. It's happening here. But the kids are doing so well. They're the captain of this and that and great grades and good friends. How bad could it be? Or the judge could say, yes, alienation is real. I believe it's happening here, but the kids are so fragile, we can't rock the boat. So the judge has a built-in excuse for doing nothing whether the kids are thriving or suffering. And so when I was an expert witness, I had 11 reasons why the court should intervene. I can't rattle them off now because I haven't thought about it in a long time, but I would talk about like identity development and what happens to a child's identity development when they are cut off from a parent. What happens to their adult relationships? How are they going to function as a, as a romantic partner or on the job if they think it's okay to just cut off people who annoy you? I talk about how it's a form of psychological maltreatment and what that means, and on and on and on. I'm just slicing it every way I can. I talk about brain development and how even a teenager doesn't have the capacity to make such a decision. We don't let teenagers decide whether to wear helmets when they ride their bike. We don't let them choose to drink, smoke, get married, join the army, drop out of school. Why? Because teenagers are not particularly good at weighing the risks. That's just, the prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed. The amygdala, which is the part of the brain that controls gut reactions and emotional decision-making, that's sort of overdeveloped in teenagers. So I explain that to the judge. So I just go through all of that. But if you're going to get a judge past, you don't want to strike out at third base. You're going to have to convince the judge that doing something is better than doing nothing, which is not their default setting. Their default is, this is where the kid is. We should just leave them there. Then you've got the final hurdle, which is to get the judge to order the thing that you want them to order. Because even if you get a judge to say, yes, I believe alienation is real. Yes, it's happening here. All right, you got me. I'm going to do something. What they want to do is the wrong thing. And what they want to do is routine outpatient reunification therapy, an hour a week in the therapist's office while the kid still lives with the favored parent. Now, I say that's the wrong thing because my scenario is this is a case of severe alienation, because I don't recommend people go through all this for a mild or moderate case. In severe alienation, an hour a week with a therapist will most likely, highly, most likely fail. And I go through the court, these 7 reasons, because, everybody likes lists, the 7 reasons why that therapy will fail. So, that's sort of the way that I think about it. Other people might have their own way of kind of slicing the pie, but I try to think about what are the sticking points for the judge? Where's the judge going to be like, but. So that's how I came up with those 4 things.
Yeah, that's very helpful. And it makes a lot of sense. And I think, because that is the severe alienation, and these are the hurdles and things, for the ultimate remedy, which you're asking for, which is only for the severe cases, the immersion. What is appropriate? Let's say we've got a mild, moderate case, and we know something needs to be done. Does that reunification therapy, like once a week, does that work in a mild or moderate, or something kind of maybe in between the once a week and immersion? Is there something that you have found?
Something like that. And I generally do not recommend therapy for alienated kids, even individual therapy. Unless your child has some other problem. They're depressed, they're anxious, they have an eating problem, they're being bullied. I believe in getting mental health treatment for kids if they need it. But if the only problem is the alienation, therapy is probably not going to help, and most likely it will make it worse because the therapist will side with the child. And if the child comes in and says, I don't feel comfortable at mom's house anymore, the therapist is going to write a letter, and you could lose all your parenting time. Therapists love their clients, and they especially love their child clients. And I've just seen it over and over and over and over again. So I have a lot of clients who are like, I want my kid to be in individual therapy, and I'm going to go to court for. I'm like, I would think about that, because that therapy, you're giving a lot of power to a total stranger. Who is going to bring that kid to the therapist's office? Is it the other parent? making nice with a therapist before and paying that person, and forget it. You're not gonna, it's not gonna, most likely it's not gonna go well.
So what should you ask for? What should be your goal to help, change this situation or improve your relationship with your
Yeah,
child?
I'm not sure I can answer that in a generic sense. It depends on the age of your kids and how much parenting time you're getting and what the relationship is like. And um, I just don't think that you need to always go to court. I think a lot of times um, people want the courts to do something. The court is not able to stop people from engaging in a lot of alienation behaviors. So if you think the other parent, let's say you have a text message from the other parent to your kid that you see that says, your mother is a bitch or something, whatever, something bad, right?
Right.
Even that, like just flat out bad behavior, it's not something the courts are really equipped to do, to deal with. They're not going to go into the other person's home and make them stop doing it. The thing that you have the most control over is your own behavior with your child. And before I say to people, oh, you should go to court for that, it's like, you really have to think about the pros and cons. It is expensive, it's time consuming. Often the other kid gets mad at the kids get mad at you if you take the other parent to court. You're likely to lose something. Everybody walks out a loser, in my opinion, from court. You win some things, but you also lose some things. And sometimes I think a parenting coordinator is a good thing to ask for. That's something I like in some states. They sit between you and the judge, and they'll be like, no, no other parent, you need to deliver those kids right now, or I'm calling the judge. And they'll be like, okay. Sometimes that works to have that extra authority. But I put most of my emphasis on helping people be better parents, because that's where the action is. That because I'm not an attorney, I'm not sitting there thinking about legal solutions for people. I'm really focusing on, you're with your kid. What can you do to enhance the attachment, increase the positive aspects of the relationship, and manage the conflict? Those are sort of the two things: turning up the dial on the positive and turning the dial down on the negative. And that doesn't mean giving your child everything they want or agreeing with everything they say. It's about having your child experience you as safe, loving, and available all the time, every single minute. You need to be safe, loving, and available. And how you do that, that's really what the coaching is about.
Well, and I really appreciate this, Amy, because it is a different spin, but you have that ability, and that is your expertise in coaching. Obviously you come to attorney, we don't do the coaching or therapy. We can only get remedies and seek remedies in court. But oftentimes you're, maybe, working on your own behavior, and yes, maybe there's a bad actor and there are some things we can do, but I don't think it's ever bad advice to be reflective, and particularly for adults dealing with children. They are children. You are the adult. You can control your emotions and try to create a better situation when you do have time.
Yeah, we all stay in our lane. I do not give legal advice. I try to help people think about questions to ask your attorney, not, like, what else could I be doing? Would supervised visitation make sense? I often recommend to clients who, like, their kids aren't coming at all, and they're in the middle of a long, custody evaluation, or for whatever reason, there's a hiatus. I'm like, I think you should file a motion for supervised visitation. You're likely to get it. It's low hanging fruit. Nobody can say it's unsafe because you're in a whatever, but at least you'd be with your child. And then I can give them a lot of coaching on how to make the most of that time that they're with their kid. And if the other parent keeps sabotaging it, well, that's more information for the courts. And I think a lot of times people have this idea that they are conceding that they're abusive if they agree or ask for supervised visitation. So I try to help people sort of put their ego or their pride aside and say, how can I show my child that I love them in this moment, given the situation that I'm in? And sometimes that's filing a motion just to ask for supervised visitation. And of course, if you do a good job and there's supervisor notes, then you've got another piece of data that reassures the court that you're, that you are capable of being attentive and sensitive to your kid.
And that's great advice, right? Look for ways to provide evidence of where, that relationship. Well, what I guess I didn't ask you to begin with, and it really doesn't matter as far as, obviously you've helped and you coach men and women, and I'm sure have helped both throughout your career. We represent women only here at Florida Women's Law Group, but I'd love to hear from you just over your career. If you have anything to share that you've learned from working with women, the majority of our listeners are women, and that you could share with them, that would be helpful.
I've had some great bosses early in my career of women who were powerful and intelligent and wanted to kind of lift me up and help me sort of become the researcher, that I became. And I'm just enormously grateful. When I started, there weren't, tons of women professors, and, I'm not that old, but, still it wasn't necessarily the norm to have a woman boss running a research center, for example. I've had some wonderful women bosses, and I'm enormously grateful for them. And I hope that, I'm now the female boss, that I'm also, lifting up and encouraging, and I hate that word empowering, but, helping other women feel good about themselves in their professional life.
Well, that is wonderful. And Amy, it's been a pleasure to have you on our show. I can't believe that the time went by so quickly. Where can our listeners find you for more information and resources?
I have a website that's my name, AmyJ L. Baker. That's it.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again. And listeners, we will have all of those links and information about Dr. Baker's books in the show notes. And thank you again for being with us today.
My pleasure.
Well, we have reached the end of our show today. And listeners, if you or someone you know is going through divorce or is thinking about a divorce, please reach out to us at FloridaWomen'sLawGroup.com or join our Facebook group, Women Winning Divorce. Links will be in the episode description. And if you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a 5-star review. And that way others can find our show. Thank you. Are you facing the challenges of divorce and feeling overwhelmed? Introducing Divorce 101, your essential online course designed to empower you through the divorce process. I'm Heather Quick, attorney and CEO at Florida Women's Law Group. Gain confidence and clarity with expert guidance on legalities, financial considerations, and your emotional well-being. We believe in empowering you to navigate this journey with strength and knowledge. Enroll in Divorce 101 today and take control of your future. As a valued podcast listener, you will get $100 off the course. So please see the show notes for the promo code and the link. You can also find out more at FloridaWomen'sLawGroup.com or always call us at 904-567-0121. Divorce for women, by women.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of Women Winning Divorce. My goal is to elevate your life and the way you are thinking so that you are best equipped to win at life. If you enjoy the show, please subscribe so you automatically get my new shows every week. And I would love to hear from you personally. Come join the conversation on social and join our Facebook group, Women Winning Divorce. We welcome your comments and suggestions. We want to bring you content that helps move your life forward. Women Winning Divorce is the place for an elevated conversation on how women can thrive during times of adversity in order to live their best life.